这次的主题是在欧美市场推广独立作品的须知。那我们很荣幸邀请到就是 Future Flash Game 的 Charles， 让我们大家以掌声先欢迎他。那他这次主要讲的呢是一个就是一个社群媒体活络时代，要如何在各大平台推广就是独立作品，以及会面临到各种挑战。那我们再一次掌声欢迎他之后，他就开始他的演讲，谢谢。
Hello and welcome to my talk about promoting games in Western markets. Thanks a lot all for coming. It's really nice to have a full room to talk to. Also, thanks a lot for the Taipei Games Developer Forum for having me here. Much appreciated. It's really nice here. In the talk today, I want to tell you a bit of what is the current state of the art and tools, tips, and tactics, how we promote games in the West and how it can work for your game, hopefully as well. There's a lot of risk and challenges involved as well, of course. And before we go into those, because there will come quite a lot of them, I thought we start off with something nice. If you consider promoting a game in the West, which I would consider would be Europe and the US, in this context, there is a lot of market potential. If we look at the global games market, that's the total revenue on top, and you can see the US and Europe both cover over 20% of that. So there is a lot of potential. But now we come to the problem that a lot of game developers have at the moment in the West. And this is something that wasn't the case so much a couple of years ago, but is a very apparent problem now. Just some numbers from a GDC talk from this year, which was called Let's Be Realistic. The average good PC game now makes $12,500 in the first month. This is not a lot of money. What we consider a good game here means this is not just an asset flip or just a copy of a game, but it's also not a big AAA game. So like a nice small game makes that amount of money. An average good PC game makes $30,000 in the first year. And if we put that into perspective, that means at the moment 93% of PC game developers don't make enough money with their games to live off it. That's obviously not great. And the main reason for that is basically this number. Most marketplaces in Europe at the moment are exploding in terms of the number of games that get released. These are the numbers from Steam, which is the biggest PC gaming platform with over 70% market share. And you can see from 2014 on, the number of games released just gets higher and higher and higher. So that means overall that people don't spend less money on games. It's just there's way more games and you have to share the money they spend with more people. So that's, I think, the main reason that games PR and promotion is more essential now than it ever was. Of course, there's still loads of games that do incredibly well and do way better than the numbers we looked at before. But a big part of it is just getting discovered with all those games out there is really hard, and there's a lot of effort to be made to stand out from the other titles. So the topics I want to cover today is what really sells games, how do I get featured in online stores, how do I get press and YouTube coverage, how do I build a community, that your launch is only the start, and a little summary. And if you look at those topics, they're obviously quite broad. There's no way I can tell you all about those topics in an hour, but I will try to give you an overview what those topics entail, and also give you a couple of links to YouTube videos, to different blog posts, and so on, that you can read up on more if you're interested in a certain topic of those things. A couple of words about me before we start. My name is Thomas Reisenegger. I run a small PR agency in Brighton, UK. Called Future Friends Games, and in my career in PR, I've worked on over 50 games. Quite big titles like League of Legends and Paladins, but recently a lot of really more premium indie titles like Northgard, Normalist Phone, Orwell, and so on. On the top right, you see that's the selection of games we work on at the moment for Gamescom, which is the biggest conference in Europe. And when I don't do PR, I talk a lot about PR at different events like GDC, like here, Indicate Europe, and so on. I also did something called the Indie Games PR Survey last year, where I interviewed 128 studios to talk about their PR and what they do and how it works out for them. To give you some context about the games I'm talking about today, where those strategies and tactics hopefully work, it will mostly focus on PC and console games and premium mobile games. The only type of game that's more difficult and a bit different to approach would be free-to-play mobile games. They take a different role in the West, especially when it comes to press and YouTube coverage. So, starting right off is chapter 1, what really sells games. So there was a problem we have in the company that we promoted games, a lot of games over the years, and usually got quite good PR results, but suddenly the games sold less copies. And that was because the number of games increased. So we looked into why are there still games that sell way better than other games? What is the thing that really makes them sell? So we did some research, we looked into different things. We looked, maybe it's the quality. We thought maybe if you just make a really good game, you're going to sell well. But there's actually loads of cases and studies and good blog posts that reference big databases where there's really well-reviewed, really good games that don't make a dent and don't sell a lot. So a good game is really, really helpful. Don't get me wrong, it's great to have a good game and it's essential to succeed, but it's not a guarantee. We also looked at YouTubers and streamers. 4 or 5 years ago, if a big YouTuber, a big streamer made a video about your game, you would sell a lot of copies. That totally changed as well. There's lots of cases now where a YouTuber with millions of subscribers picks up a game, but then that only results in 10 sales or something. The same goes for platform. When there were less games on the platforms, they would sell automatically just for being on there. Those times are over. All the platforms are more open, and you need to do way more to stand out on those platforms. Same goes for media coverage. A couple of years ago, again, if all the big websites would write about you, you would sell loads of copies. It's not the case anymore today. Same goes for big brands. Even if you had a successful game and you do a follow-up, there's loads of cases where that didn't provide success for the follow-up game. So it can help, but it's not a guarantee for success. And the same goes for social media. Loads of companies that do well on social media, lots of games, have a lot of interest, but don't actually convert people to buy the game. So that's obviously not great if you don't know really what sells games. So we were like, okay, let's just ask people that make games what sells games for them. So this is results from the survey. And as you can see, they said the most helpful thing to actually sell them games were store features, sales, that means discounts, bundles, and that kind of stuff, websites, YouTubers, and social media. And then a couple of other things following after that. But I think what you can also see on there is that those things are all quite strong in the terms of helped a lot or helped a bit. So again, it's such a big mix of different things. And the big takeaway in terms of PR marketing is, for me, that there is not really one magic bullet that's going to help sell your games. It's a mix of loads of different things. How I would see PR marketing is that way. If you make a game, you have a lottery ticket, and you might win and sell loads of copies of your games. If you do a lot of PR marketing, you get more lottery tickets. You might have YouTubers that help you, you might have press that help you, you might get store features. All those kind of things don't guarantee your success, but they give you more chances of being successful. The basic for all those things, the basis for successful PR marketing, and this is really important, and this is one of, I think, of the hardest lessons, is to make the right type of game. This is really hard to predict, especially when you start game development and then you work on it for 2 or 3 years. But there's such a big difference between what type of game is interesting at the moment for players. You definitely don't want to make a game that people like, because there's lots of good games that people like, and they will like your video, they will maybe share it, but you want to make a game that people love, even if it's a small amount of people, but that amount of people actually buys your game. So it's really important to serve a niche well and be perfect in that little niche. Here's 2 recent examples. This is actually a game we worked on. It's called Rifter. It's really, really good. It's a 2D platformer. It's really fast. It's beautiful. It got really good reviews. It didn't sell very well. The main reason being that there's loads of really good platformers, from Spelunky to Super Meat Boy to all Super Mario games. This genre is so hard to be successful in that even with a really good game, you're not gonna have it easy. But then we look at a game like House Flippers, where you basically go into a house that's completely ruined, and you build it up, renovate it, you make it nice, and then you sell the house, and then you go to the next house. There wasn't a game like that before. This is a quite new concept. That game got quite mixed Steam reviews, like 70% positive. It's not great, but it sold thousands and thousands of copies because there's just nothing similar. So it really depends on what type of game you have. Often it makes more sense to innovate or serve a special niche well than being really good in a really crowded field. Now we want to look at 4 cases that did really well, and we want to talk about why they did well. There's a game called Northgard. It's a strategy game with Vikings. It looks really nice. It did extremely well on Steam. They have over 500,000 owners, so a really good success story. And why the game did so well? It didn't get a lot of press coverage in the beginning. It didn't get so much YouTube coverage in the beginning. But Steam, the PC platform where everybody buys the game in the West, really liked the game, and it kept recommending it to everybody. And that's why the game is so big. And the second example we also worked on is a game called Old Man's Journey. And if you don't know it, it's a 2D game. It's like 2 or 3 hours long, but it's like an old guy walking in the mountains. It looks absolutely beautiful. It looks stunning. And that's also what Apple thought, and that's why they keep featuring it on their App Store, I think over 4,000 times last year in different app stores in different countries. But basically Apple was like, this makes our iPhone look really great. Let's just put the game everywhere and sell it like crazy. So for those two companies, for those two games, they clearly benefited from getting store features. They specifically had games that worked well for a specific store and sold loads of copies through that. So that's one way to do it. However, there's also another way. We're going to look at a game called Niche, which is a game about where you build little animals with genetics. And it looks really nice. There's not something similar really around there. They sold over 50,000 copies, or over 50,000 owners already. And another game called The First Tree. It's a nice little indie game where you play a fox. It's a narrative game. Looks beautiful. Also had over 20,000 owners in the first week or so. So they were quite successful, but not through store features. What they did, they had a launch build-up. What that means is they built up a community over years, step by step, with small things. And through that, they were successful on day one, which also helped them to get little features, sell more copies, but they really granularly built it up. And I would say this is like two general approaches that you can take to make a game successful. And I wouldn't say one of them is better than the other. However, a store feature is way more risky, because if you target your game for a specific store, and for some reason they don't pick it up, you basically have no visibility. But if they do pick it up, you have way less work because you just need to convince them to feature your game. You don't have to put loads of money into marketing PR all the time. Whereas a launch build-up is a lot more work, but also it's a secure way, I would say, because you're going to have your community, you're going to have your fans ready that want to buy your game, and maybe you get a store feature on top anyway. Also for the launch build-up, just to explain that a bit better, what I mean by that, this is a really good blog post from The First Tree, and basically those are the stats of things they had for launch. They had 1,200 wish lists, which is like a pre-order thing on Steam, and if you wishlist the game, you get an email on the day it launches, so people can get a notification. They had a good amount of mailing list subscribers, Twitter followers, Tumblr followers, and so on. But they did not get that overnight. They did really put a lot of work, a lot of effort into that. This is like the breakdown, and you can see they have a good GIF trending on Twitter, they have a blog post here and there on Imgur. It's a blogging platform. And then they always get a couple of subscribers more and more and more. But it really took them the 2 years of development promoting the game to build up those numbers. So if you start a month before launch, that's way too late. If you want to have a launch build-up, you need to start early and really work it. It's the grind. There's nothing that just boosts your numbers like crazy. You just have to keep posting, have to keep doing, and really build up your community. So we're going to talk about those two approaches. First in Chapter 2 about the store feature, and then we're going to talk about the launch build-up. So how do you get your game featured in an online store? I think easiest is we just look at the biggest online stores in the West. If we look at mobile, it's the App Store from Apple and the Google Play Store for Android. And they dominate the market. And how to get a feature there is you just basically talk to them, and if they like your game, they're going to feature you. They have a specific taste in games, so if you follow their App Store and look through it, you're going to see a pattern what type of games they like. What we also know helps, especially for Apple, because we know a couple of editors there, they do reach their websites touchy and Pocket Gamer. Those are the biggest English-speaking mobile games website. And they get a lot of sources from there, which games are cool at the moment and what they like. So it really helps getting coverage on those sites to get a feature as well. On the console, it's pretty much the same. It's all about talking to the platform holders, talking to Sony for the PlayStation, talking to Microsoft, talking to Nintendo, and see if they like your game and if they can get you a feature. And of course, for all those things, it helps if you have good press coverage. If you win awards, you can talk easier to them because you can say, like, look, we got 500,000 views on YouTube, we got 10 awards, people want that game. A really different story is Steam, the big PC platform, where for the really big titles, you can also talk to an account manager and they can get you a feature. But what that platform really relies on is something really different. So we're going to talk a bit about Steam, the special case, also because Steam is usually the first platform developers go to because it's really easy to get a game on there and really easy to use. You basically pay $100 and you can put your game on Steam and have an extremely big market open to you. So it's really user-friendly, really great for that. On the downside, it's also really easy to use and open for everybody. That means we had over 7,500 games in 2017, and that's over 20 games per day. So that's a crazy number. So you have loads of competition on there. In the end, that means there's loads of games out there, but not so many winners. It's a really algorithm-driven platform. What I mean by that is there is some account managers. They are extremely hard to reach unless you're high profile already. One example is from a game we helped working on from a really small team that did not have those contacts. It's a game called Path Out, and it's a free game about a Syrian refugee. And basically, they launched the game, put it in the store, and there was a bug, so the download button didn't show up. So the game was in the store, and nobody could download it. And it took us 4 days or something to reach someone at Steam, because it's just really hard to even get contact details to a person there, because it's mostly just driven by the algorithm. But of course, if there's an algorithm, you can also work with the algorithm, which is really great, because you might get a feature that you wouldn't get otherwise on another platform if you know how to use Steam right. So here's some tips about Steam Store optimization. There's a really, really excellent talk on YouTube called More Than Luck, Strategies for Success on Steam, from an Australian conference I saw. And they basically explain a bit how the Steam algorithm works, because Steam is not open with those things, so it's a bit guesswork how it actually works. And the basic message is that if you launch a game, you're going to show up in a list that says new games. And because there's so many games coming out, you're going to get bumped down that list really quickly, because new games are coming up from top. But within the time you're on the new games list, Steam basically looks at how much money do you make them per second. So what you basically need to do is have a really nice image so people click on your game, but only the people you want, so they actually buy the game when they're on the store page, and then hopefully leave a good review as well. And with that system, Steam figures out within a couple of hours of launch if your game makes them good money or not. If it makes them good money, they're going to feature you. If it doesn't make them good money, they're going to drop you pretty much immediately, and it's going to be really hard to sell anything on Steam. So having a good day one or a good first couple of hours on Steam is essential. A couple of points how you can have a better couple of first hours is collect wish lists. Those are the things that people get a notification when the game launches. So whatever you do, if you make a trailer, if you make a tweet, and your game is coming to Steam, always have the call to action and say wish list now. Because if you have a big mailing list of those people, there's a good chance they're going to buy your game at day one, and they can really boost you. There's also something called Steam Curators, which is quite new. Basically, it means you can send 100 codes to press, to influencers, to YouTubers that are in the system. And if they leave you a good review, your game gets boosted as well. And also for a couple of months now, you can stream directly on the store page, which is obviously great because people that watch your game on the store page are just a couple of centimeters away with their mouse to actually buy your game. And Steam also drives people to you. So it's really good if you, for all games we highly recommend, if you launch a game, make a launch stream. Sit down a couple of hours, just play your game. You're always going to have between 50 and 100 people watching. So those that come in and out, and that number is always between 50 and 100, and they're directly on your store page. So that can be really good on your first day to get some extra sales. There's also other things you can do. There's a little trick how you can make GIFs on your store page. It's not supported officially by the system, but if you just take a JPEG and just change the name, a GIF and change the name to JPEG, it will play it automatically. So you can make little things like that from a really cool game where they have a little animation over the text. It's also really important to have a good capsule image. This is basically the little banner image that will show up in the store. And this is a little image that's the one and only thing that a lot of people are going to see in your store. So I would put loads of work into making that image really look nice. And another thing that's really important for this, so that's the Steam Store page. Here we see the capsule image, and then there's this little short text. And most people are only going to read that text and not necessarily look at a lot of videos or click to the text that comes down there. So I would also put a lot of work into that text. And again, here it's really important to not speak to everybody, kind of, but just really target the people that are going to love your game and are actually going to buy it and also leave you a good review. So the example of Super Fright is really good, because if you see that text, it says something that a PR person usually wouldn't say you should do. It says, it's a great game to relax half an hour and chase your latest high score. Obviously, that sounds like there's not a lot of content, but this is the truth. There is not a lot of content, but it's a really fun game to just fly around for half an hour. And it really spoke to people that just wanted something to play in a little break. They didn't want to have a big RPG or a big action game. They just wanted to have something small. And that's why that game was so successful, because the Steam page was completely spot on and attracted a lot of people that exactly look for that kind of game. The next chapter is how do we get press and influencer coverage. So by press, I mean online articles and also print articles. And by influencer, I mean people that make videos on YouTube and people that live stream your game on Twitch. Before we start off with that, again, why is it even important to get those things? We said in the beginning that they don't necessarily boost your sales super much, but they do help. They give you some sales. They also help you talking to publishers. Those things help you talking to other developers that might boost you. And most importantly, they do convert sales in the long run. If you just think about how you buy games or how you decide what movie you want to watch in the cinema, usually if you just see a game or a film once, you just go like, oh, cool, and forget about it. But if you keep seeing the same game over and over, you see it 3, 4, 5 times, you go like, I keep seeing that, that's pretty cool. I think I might actually get that. So this is a really good way of getting more of those impressions, getting more of those contact points. It's not done with having one good article, but if you have a couple of articles over time and also a nice Steam feature and so on, this really boosts your sales over time. So we talk about a bit how we get coverage for press in Western media. For that, I put together a 3-step plan for the perfect press outreach. And first, we want to figure out what we want to tell the press people. Then we figure out who those journalists are who are they? Who do we want to send the stuff to? And the last point is we want to figure out how we want to communicate those things to them. So let's start right off with what do we want to tell them. In the beginning, when we work on a game, usually we make a PR plan. And in every PR plan, every game has 2 really good PR beats, 2 really good talking points. This is the reveal of the game, the first time it's announced, and the launch of the game. Those are 2 things you should definitely promote. They're quite natural. They're also good pillars to look what else you could do for planning. Because as we said before, we want to have those 3 to 5 contacts with the gamers or potential customers. So how do we get more coverage out for a game? We have little other talking points in between. Those can be various things. We're going to look at the moment. So those are called news beats, and news beats are basically talking points you can send to press and hopefully get them to talk about your game. Game announcement, for example, is one, might be good. What's usually better than a game announcement is the game reveal. That means the first time you have a video. That's when a lot of press will at least read your email because they want to see new games and at least watch your video for a couple of seconds and see if it's interesting or not. You can also send them gameplay videos, especially the first time you actually show gameplay is really good. There's different PR stunts. There's a talk where I talk about guerrilla marketing on the GDC website if you want to see that. If you port your game to other console, if it's coming to Switch, if it's coming to another platform, you can send that to press. Feature video about special things in your game. Release date announcements are usually quite good. They're also good for search for SEO for websites. That's why they like to cover them often. And the release itself, of course, is also a talking point. There is a list of other talking points that are not that great, but can still be nice. Depends on your type of game, and often you should maybe combine them with one of the green points or a couple of those points together. For example, if you have a demo, it can be good news. If you bundle it up with one of those things. Same is the start of a crowdfunding on Kickstarter, for example. Gameplay videos, awards, localizations, smaller updates, discounts, out of early access launches are also possible talking points, just not as strong as the others. So once we got our talking points figured out, we make a PR plan usually, where on top you have the topics we just discussed. Then it makes sense to just figure out what assets do you need, what screenshots do you need, what trailers do you need, that kind of stuff, so it's prepared in advance. And lastly, it's good to just define who gets the news. Sometimes it goes to general interest press, sometimes specifically Nintendo press, sometimes just to your fans, and depending on who you send it to, you want to tweak the message a bit. Also some tips for PR planning. Often it's really hard to start because game development, everything gets changed all the time, everything gets moved, there's a lot of stuff going on. A really good starting point, even if it's not final, but just to start somewhere, is the release date and plan from there. For those PR beats, the talking points, I would recommend to at least leave 2 to 3 weeks between those, otherwise it's just too much if you send it out all the time. Especially for press, for your community, you can send a bit more. There was also a really good survey that asked if you send review keys to people, how many weeks in advance they want to have it. Most press want to have 3 weeks before the game launches so they can test the game and have enough time to really look into it. Really, if you do a PR planning, this is really important. I keep missing it myself, but just double check dates. This means check for bank holidays in other countries as well. This is really a big miss if you just don't look it up and then it's bank holiday, no journalist works and nobody can write about the game. Look up other game releases. There's a couple of websites that just show what games are coming out that day. And if there's another big release or another similar game, maybe push your date back. And also look up events. So there's no big video game event where press is attending, because then they can't write if they have to be at that event. Especially for the West, important is E3 in the US and Gamescom in Europe, the two biggest conferences. And basically, during that week when that happens, a week before and a week after, I wouldn't send any news out unless you're a really big company already, because all the big studios are going to announce their new news, they're going to show press conferences and whatnot. So it's really, really hard to break through the noise when you're a smaller studio in that time. The second point is, who do we want to talk to? How do we find journalists? Secret tip, Google, that's it. Usually, I recommend looking up a competitor game or a game that's similar and just Googling journalists that are really interested in that kind of game and then try to email them. If you struggle to find the email address, there's something called hunter.io. It's a website where you can basically put in the name and of the journalist on the website, and it just looks through the internet if they somehow have their email address public somewhere. So it does not do anything illegally. It does not get the email address from somewhere it shouldn't go. It just scrolls through the internet and sees if they publicly posted it somewhere already. And there's also a tool called SimilarWeb, which is a website and a Google Chrome extension, which we really like to use. And what it basically does, it shows you the traffic number of a website. It's especially important if you work in a foreign market, because sometimes you don't know what is big. Like IGN is the biggest gaming website, but IGN Germany is quite small, even in Germany. But there's no way to know that unless you look up the traffic. So I would highly recommend, if you deal with foreign media, just look up how big they roughly are. I mentioned it before, that mobile games work a bit different in terms of media. This is just a short overview of that. For mobile games, there is just not that many websites. Most important ones are touchy and Pocket Gamer. And then usually there's one or two local outlets, so one or two big Spanish websites, big German websites, and so on. But that's pretty much it. Again, getting coverage on those sites is super important, but there's not so much you can do in terms of getting more press coverage. Versus PC and console games, there's way more media, there's way bigger media, and they also sometimes talk about mobile games, but only under certain conditions. That's usually when you have a really big brand already. If you make a port from a successful PC or console game on a mobile version, they would talk about it. If you have a game that's just a phenomenon like Pokemon Go, okay, everybody talked about that, but that's not the norm. And sometimes you can get a feature article. That means you don't talk so much about your game, but more about the development behind it. Another thing for how the news travels in the West, this is especially important if you have limited budget and you can't afford to target every country in Europe and the US in detail. Your best bet is going to be go for those guys. Those are the biggest English-speaking websites pretty much. There's maybe a couple of more, but what those websites do is really important, they're opinion leader. So if a couple of those sites will talk about your game on the same day, there's a really good chance that other Western countries will cover your game as well. Of course, if you have the budget, it's still better to just also have a German press release and send it to the Germans, and have a French version of your press release and send it to the French media. But if you can only target one market, definitely go for the English-speaking, because the other websites are definitely heavily influenced by them. A question that I get quite often, especially in terms of Europe, is it enough if I just send everything in English? For most of press, I would say yes. But also consider if you send an English press release to a French journalist, he probably understands it, but he needs to translate it so he can write a news post. So it's more work from him. He can't just use your material and copy part of sentences out. He really has to rewrite everything and translate it. In terms of players, I would say there's a couple of countries in Europe that are definitely very confident with English and they don't need any translations. Germany and Austria is fine. For a lot of other countries, it is highly recommended if that's one of your key markets that you translate your game into that language. Also, considering culturally touchy subjects is, of course, an important thing. Here we have a photo from Indiana Jones, an American film where Indiana Jones beats up a Nazi, and he has a swastika, the logos of the Nazis on there. However, if you look at a big game, that's Wolfenstein 2, we see that he doesn't have that logo. The reason for that is in Germany, it's allowed to show a swastika in films because they're culturally important. Whereas games are considered entertainment, and it is not allowed in entertainment products to have a swastika. Otherwise, your game gets taken off the market and you have to pay a fine. So there's lots of little things like that where if you have the chance, ask people from those countries if there's anything in the game that is offensive to them or the law speaks against it. And the second step is how do we communicate the message well? This is step-by-step guide, more or less, what text and what email we want to have and how a video could look like for our game. It's really important to learn to talk about your game. This is one of the most important things you can do in PR. It's often missed because it sounds easy, but it's really difficult. What I mean by that, I often do something that's called a friends test. And that basically means you go to a party, you meet friends, some of them gamers, some not. And they still say, hey, Thomas, how are you doing? What are you working on? And then you have like 10 seconds to explain them what are you working on. Because otherwise, they would just get bored and not listen to you. Because they're friends, they really do that. They have other things to talk about. So basically, if you say, oh, I make a sci-fi game where there's loads of spaceship and they fly around and there's PvP and multiplayer and there's 38 different ship variations, they're just going to be like, yeah, right. OK, let's talk about something else. So you have to really figure out like a 10-second little pitch how you can get them on site. Like you could say, we make a new spaceship game and it has the biggest spaceship ever. And every ship there's 50,000 people and it's crazy just managing them and fighting against the other fleet and it's all really slow and tactical. And they'd be like, yeah, that's interesting. So you need to find that 10 seconds pitch. And usually you need that pitch for loads of different things like your store. You need it definitely for journalists and YouTubers. Not because they're not interested in hearing about your game, but they get like hundreds of emails a day. They don't have time to read a long wall of text. They want to have in a couple of seconds, want to know why your game is special. So from this friends test, I usually try to generate something that we call a short text. This is like a one-line description of what a game is. And that should make clear to the person reading your email if they would be interested in that type of game or not. And what I also really like is just having one GIF that just shows more or less what the game is in 3 seconds. So with those 2 things, you should already have a quite good idea what the title is about. And after you've had that short text figured out that you're going to use a lot in your pitches, we often do a long text, which is just a longer description of how the game works. Again, you need that maybe a link to that on your website. You want to have that in a press kit. You want to have that information somewhere so people can look it up. But first, you need to get them interested. So this is an email template. This is how we usually write emails to Western press. We really try to keep it short, and it's something we call the AIDA pitch formula. First, we want to get the attention of press. Their inboxes are filled with hundreds of emails. You need a good subject line and immediately hook them and tell them what's good about your game. In that example, this is a game called A Normal Lost Phone, which is a quite long name that doesn't tell you too much about the game. So we decided to put the topic in front because we think that's way more interesting and intriguing for journalists that don't know what it is. So we said, this is a mystery game dealing with homophobia and self-discovery. And it had really good open rates because a lot of press looks at it and be like, OK, this is a topic that doesn't get a lot of talked about in press, in games, so it might be interesting. So now we have their attention, now we got their interest. Just a little one-line text where we explain them what the news is about. We just say again, this is the game, the news today is, it's out. We immediately follow with a little GIF. It's not animated here, but it was animated in the original email. And then immediately a link to the trailer. So really keep it to the essentials. Keep it really short. If the press person is interested, they have a desire to find out more, just put in a link of things they can do. Usually we have a link to the press kit where they can download videos, where they can download screenshots and that kind of stuff. And then often we have a link to an online press release where you'll find the long text and the long info. And sometimes we also just post a press release right underneath in the email. But in that short text, keep it really, really short. And usually we end the email with an action. That could be, do you want to have an interview? Let me know. If you would share that video with your readers, I would be really happy. If you want a review code, let me know. Something they can do or they can respond to. So that's the short email overview of how I would structure emails. Another thing is trailers. This was one of the most shocking findings of the survey, probably, of the Indie Games PR survey. We asked people who made your launch trailer. And 82% of the people said somebody in-house made the launch trailer. And this is not great. The trailer is like the one most single important thing you're going to have in terms of PR marketing for your game. If you think about it, your trailer is probably the only thing that most people are going to see. They're going to look at it at the store page. Your publisher is going to look at it if you look for them. The platform holders are going to look at it. The journalists are going to look at it. So really, the trailer is the book of your cover. This is the one thing where if you have a limited budget and you only want to put money into one thing, I would say make a really nice trailer. Make sure that's right. Get someone professional to cut your trailer. Get someone good to record your footage. That can really make a big, big difference. For example, if you look here, this is the Untitled Goose game, where you play a really mean goose. And it looks really cool, but especially it had such a great trailer. If you have the chance later, look it up. It's 2 or 3 minutes long. It's really funny. And that really boosted the game from out of nowhere to it got like 500,000 views on the YouTube, 1 million views on IGN. It's really big now, just because the trailer and the concept of the game is so great. Now I want to talk a bit about Twitch and YouTube. For YouTube, if you write that pitch email, I would use a similar email that we wrote to press, just maybe put a code in so people can play the game, but it can be a similar structure. However, if you look up, people change on the YouTube search field, change the country, because otherwise you're only going to get, depending on where you are, you probably only get Mandarin-speaking YouTubers, we only get English-speaking YouTubers, but you really should change it for the location so you get the local YouTubers as well. Send them codes before launch, again, 3 to 4 weeks maybe. This is really important on YouTube because if a YouTuber puts up a video, they want to be first in the search results if somebody looks up that game. And the only way they get there is if they're either really, really big or if they have the video first. So a lot of smaller and mid-sized YouTubers will cover your game, but only if you send your code really early. I would say only contact YouTubers if you have a playable version of the game. It's not like press where you just send them updates and keep them in the loop and hopefully you get more articles. They just want to play your game. So if you don't have a code or a preview version yet, don't contact them. I would also differentiate between mid-sized and big YouTubers. Mid-sized YouTubers, if they have a special need, will maybe cover your games over multiple videos, whereas most big YouTubers that cover loads of games, they will only cover your game once. So really consider that. If you have a preview version and send that out and it gets covered by big YouTube already, it's maybe not so good because maybe you want to have that at launch so people can actually buy the game when they see it. So keep that in mind that most of those guys will only play your game once. Twitch, the biggest live streaming platform, really great. One thing Twitch is really not great at is finding Twitch streamers is really difficult, and also finding their contact details is really difficult. There's our website called twitchmetrics.com, where you have different search filters where you can say, I just want streamers that cover that game, I just want streamers that cover loads of different indie games, I want them from certain countries, certain sizes. So this is really helpful if you do research on how to find good streamers for the West, definitely use that website. And you can also do things that make people stream more of your game. For example, Dead Cells recently had an update where they added Twitch integration, which means that the Twitch chat, so the viewers of the live stream, can interact with the game. So if they post certain things in it, they can, for example, control the enemy, which makes it, of course, funny because suddenly the viewers can play against the Twitch streamer. So if you have features like that you could implement where the audience can play against a certain streamer, that can really be helpful. One really important thing there is that you have to tell the streamer it's in there. They're not going to download your game and check it out. You have to tell them that there are certain features they can do to play with their audience. Chapter number 4 is how we build a community. Community building can start really early. It can even start before you have a first trailer because you can just put out as much as you want and start building whenever you want. One really good thing for the West, I think, if you use Twitter, is something called Screenshot Saturday, where every Saturday developers share a GIF or a screenshot of the thing they worked on this week. And this can really blow up. There's a game called Oobledge, which is great at that. They make funny little GIFs, and every Saturday they post it. And a lot of them get thousands of shares, and it really helps them to break out of the little social media bubble. And it really doesn't hurt to post every week on that. I would highly recommend that. If you want to get attention in the West and your game looks visually nice, this is a really good tool. Also, going to local meetups is really good, like you do here. Conferences you can go to is really helpful to just get playtesters on board, to make other developer friends, all things that can help you in the long run. It's really important for community building to pick the right channel. I could talk about it for hours, but I don't have the time for that. So I'm just going to go over the most important channels with a couple of words so you know what they are and how they would work. I think Twitter is probably the most used one and the best one for game developers in the West. There's an example of Oobledge. There's another example of a raccoon game that looks really cool and got like loads of shares, and they post really regularly, and they make the game really big. And this is the power of Twitter. If enough people like your little GIF or your little text that you have, they're going to share it a lot. And this is like probably the only platform where you can break out of your little social media bubble. You can really reach new people that you wouldn't usually see your game. Facebook is, of course, also important, but not so much in terms of game development in the West. The main thing is that if you post stuff on Facebook, usually your family would see it and your friends would see it, but it's really hard to break out of your social media bubble because people don't share as much. It's not really made for that. So what we usually recommend indie developers is focus on Twitter, post a lot there, and then also use that content for Facebook, just cross-post it, but don't focus on Facebook. It's usually not good to just get more followers. Newsletters having a bit of a revival at the moment. More people use them again. Just sending people classic emails on a mailing list has one really big advantage. They definitely get your email. With Twitter and Facebook, sometimes people miss the post, or the post is not popular enough, so it gets hidden from certain people. Whereas a newsletter means you send one email, people get one email. So it's really good. Discord is a platform that's really gaining traction at the moment. For community building, it helps you to talk to your players. They can chat to each other. It has different channels where they can set up and talk to. It's a really great tool if you have a game that has procedural generation, that is system-based, that lives longer, where people want to talk about different systems in the game, different tactics, all that kind of stuff. If you want to see a really good Discord channel, I highly recommend the one of the game Descenders. It's a mountain bike game. And it's really great how they set it up, how they have different channels, how they take advantage of Discord. So if you want to look into that, highly recommend checking that out. And the last, I think, social media platform I want to mention is Reddit, which is basically a link sharing and news sharing platform, which can be really helpful to boost the visibility of your game. However, Reddit is really hard to use. If you go in there with a new account to just promote your game, they will completely destroy you. So what you basically need to do is either be an active member of the community, build up your account, post regularly, talk to people, or find someone who is so they can post your game. So it is a really good channel, but definitely handle Reddit with care, because if you post something wrong, people are not going to be happy. And there's also a really good GDC talk about community building called Power of the Pack. So if you want to look a bit more into that, I would highly recommend looking at that. Actually, one last social media platform that is just becoming quite popular for games, but only in the last couple of months. I think a lot of game developers don't know yet it's a thing that really works well. It was originally an image sharing platform. It is now like a post platform, and the usual post looks like that. That's from a game we worked on. And usually you have a GIF, you have a bit of text that explains the GIF, a GIF, and then with a bit of more text, and so on. A post type that works well is just go on there and say, hi, I'm the developer, I made this game, do you like it? If yes, you can sign up here, you can wishlist here. People are usually quite friendly on this platform. And how you get trending is that people just look at your post, the platform, they drive traffic to you, and then people up or downvote it. So if you have a good post that people like, they just upvote it, and that's it. You don't need a pre-existing account, you don't need a long campaign, you basically can just go in and post your thing. The nice thing is also that Imgur has a really short memory. So if you have a post that doesn't work, you can just change it and post it again in like a week later. People are not going to get mad. That's normal on the platform. It's fine. So it's definitely nice in that sense that you can just post similar things with a couple of weeks in between. If you make it to front page, you get a good amount of views. That's like usually between 100 and 200,000, which is quite good for small games. For the tone, if you write a post, really try to be casual. Just talk to people like a normal person. Just say, hey, I made this. I hope you think it's cool. No advertisement. GIFs are really important. You could only post just images, but it works way better with GIFs. If you post on Imgur, really make sure you use the hashtags gamings and game dev. This is the way on the platform how people find your post. If you don't have those hashtags, everybody's going to see your post, not only gamers, and your upvotes are going to be way lower. And if you want to see a bit more how Imgur posts could look like, there's a couple of games from a friend, 2 games I worked on, where we had a couple of Imgur posts that were trending on the front page. And they usually follow a quite similar format and structure. So if you Google them, you should get a good idea how you can post on the platform. And chapter 5 is about how the launch is only the start. Again, from the Indie Games PR survey, we asked people, when do you stop promoting your game? And 61% said, after 2 months. That's pretty short. So like a lot of people just put a game up and then promote it a bit and then pretty much leave it. And of course, if your game is not successful, that can make sense. But if your game is half successful or has more potential, I would highly recommend to keep promoting it. That days are really over, that the launch day is the one day where you make money and then it just drops to 0. Now it's like launch day is pretty good and then you keep building from there. Really makes sense to keep pushing your game. One example of a game we worked on for a bit is called Amello. And the CEO tweeted this. Namely, that after 2.5 years, they had the second highest day on Steam. So you can see that the game that's quite old, like 2.5 years is for a Steam game, really old. But they keep selling, they keep being successful. And I think launch day was the most successful one. But after that, with regular updates and really building a community, they kept being successful. There's also something from an interesting article that I found that was often discussed, I think, is that you can kind of predict the sales on Steam after your first week for how much money you're going to make in the first year. The formula is a bit like that you're going to make 5.1 times the money you're going to make in the first week in the first year. So with that calculation, it should be quite easy to see. Obviously, it's not 100% correct, but it kind of works out for most people. And it should be quite easy to see if it's worthwhile for you supporting your game over a longer period of time, or if you just drop it after a week. Maybe your first week is really bad. Maybe that was just the wrong type of game. Then it makes sense to move on. But maybe your game did okay, and then it makes sense to keep pushing it. That already brings us to the summary part. So what we discussed today is what really sells games. I would say there's two big strategies you could follow. One is you go for a store feature, or you try to build a community. How do you get features in store? For Steam, look into literature, look into articles how that algorithm works, and try to fit your Steam page to that. For the consoles and for the mobile phones, talk to the platform holders. How do you get press and YouTube coverage? Make the 10 seconds test, figure out what you want to tell people, who you want to talk to, and why you want to talk to them. How to build a community, look into those different platforms, figure out what's the best one for you. And the last one is, it makes often sense to keep promoting your game past launch, because there's a lot of sales potential in the long tail. Now here's just a slide that I put together with different talks, with different articles that I think are really helpful. A lot of info was in the talk already, but I think those are really great if you just want to learn more about the different topics at home. That's mostly it from my side. If you have questions, feel free to email me anytime. If you use Twitter, you can tweet me. If you want to follow me, I do post a lot of PR things. I'm also going to be here today and tomorrow. And if you see me and just want to talk about PR, just say hi. That's what I'm here for. So looking forward to see you. Thank you.
那我们再次掌声，就是感谢昌老师的演讲。那如果民众有任何问题的话，也可以就是现在举手，然后我们会递麦给你，让你直接做询问这样子。那我们再次掌声感谢一下昌老师。那有任何人有问题吗？就是现场的 ，OK。
Hi. You showed the metrics for like multipliers for like I guess the first week to the first year. Those are just for general desktop games. Do you have similar metrics for VR games on Steam?
Unfortunately, not. But I think I would tweet the blog out for about that.
Okay.
Like I can give the link. I don't have the numbers for it, but I'm sure the way he figured it out, he could also figure it out for VR games.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, hi. First of all, thank you very much for the talk. And my question for you today is, like you said earlier that you want to share your game and like various media to social platforms like Discord and Reddit. And obviously you want to reach as much communities as you can. But when you're sharing on those platforms, what would you say would be a very important way to present yourself to make it seem like you're actually just sharing your game and not invoke a sense of repulsion from the community because you're trying to market your game? Like, how do you make the community that you're sharing to not feel like you're trying to sell them a product?
Yeah, I think one thing that usually helps is just being upfront. That means saying, hi, I'm the developer. Never ever try to pretend you're not, and then they find out, because that's horrible. So you say you're the developer, and you just keep it very light. You just say, hey, I made this. I hope you like it. And then usually a call to action is quite helpful. If you say, hey, we have some keys here for beta testing. We would love to have some feedback. If you leave a comment, I would love to hear what you think. I think just starting a dialogue and being quite earnest really helps. And of course, it can always happen, especially on Reddit, that people are not happy with it. But I think that's part of it.
Hello, thank you for the talk. I have a question about this for contacting the medias in Western. I have a question. How long should we prepare to contact them? I mean, when we send them an email at the first time, they need some time they must need some time to review it, and then maybe take some business days and then reply us, and then we send them email back. Normally, how long it would take? Thank you.
Usually, if you have like a trailer you want to send them for the first time or a big announcement, I would send it maybe 2 to 3 days beforehand, and but leave a note and say, hey, it would be cool if you cannot publish this before in 3 days on Thursday at 5 o'clock, because this is when we actually post the trailer. Most media doesn't mind if you mention that. I would also, if they post it before, I think it can happen. That's part of the risk. Most of them are fine with just waiting until a certain date when you want them to post it. Thank you. Okay.
Hi, thank you. I have a question about early access. How does PR from that differ from just a traditional normal release? Like how do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, I think the main advice would be it does not differ so much in the terms of most YouTubers and most press. If you launch a game on early access, that means it's out. You don't care so much about the real launch, because as soon as the game is publicly available and everybody can play it, it's out there. So if you go for early access and you do an early access launch, I would really try to make that big and not just treat it as like it didn't happen. So if you have a game in early access for 2 years and then you make the full launch, it's going to be really hard to convince people to talk about it then if it wasn't big before already.
Okay, thank you.
那还有任何的问题吗？那如果就是你还有任何的问题的话，那等一下可以在外面的地方找到就 Thomas， 那只要你有遇到他，你有任何问题就可以再次跟他询问。那我们再次的就是掌声感谢他，谢谢。